All right, I think all our board members are on, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. Good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us today, staff, board colleagues, Mr. Goheen, and any guests that we might be having watching us today. So I'll call this meeting to order. It is Friday, May 14th. Sorry, we're running a little bit late, 3:06 p.m. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. So before we start, I'll go ahead and read our board norms and protocols as we do at each meeting as a board. We agree to respect the differences of opinions in making decisions for the district, to follow best practices in managing the superintendent and the management of the board itself, to stay on task when conducting business for the district, including while at board meetings, to never surprise the superintendent or each other when conducting official business of the district, to read these norms at the beginning of each board meeting and at board workshops as a reminder of how to conduct our meetings, and to continually self-check to determine if we are following our norms when conducting district business. So with that, Ms. Smith, would you please do a roll call?
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark present.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew present.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie present.
Randy Lopez.
Randy present.
Wanda Brownlee Page. You're on mute.
Wanda Brownlee Page present.
Thank you. Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen present.
Dr. Yeager.
Dr. Yeager present.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Nacho's present too, everybody. All right, with that, I would now entertain a motion to approve the special agenda.
So move.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
And Dr. Yeager.
Dr. Yeager, yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, sorry about Nacho, y'all. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into, we've got one board agenda item today. We're gathered to talk about our board budget. And before we do, Mr. Goheen, your email did come through, so I'll go ahead and share my screen so everyone can see that, and if you wanna talk about that. But I do just kind of want to level set for today. And the reason we're gathered is to, as we all know, we're in the middle of budget process, and we've sent out some documents. All board members should have received a few weeks ago the department budgets that we've been covering. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago where we started covering some of those department budgets, those from this year that have already been approved. I do want to remind us about our timeline. So we do have to have our budget submitted to the state in by August. And so, if we work our way backwards from that, really we should be looking at approving our budget in July. And I know the staff and are working on the budget for the next year based on our priorities that the board has set for the budget for next year. So I also sent out an email to the board with an Excel spreadsheet that had been requested with different salaries, as we take into consideration again the salary comparisons that we've been doing. So you all should have all of that information as well. So let me pull up my screen real quick.
And Mr. Lopez, while you're pulling that up, is it possible that we could possibly send you also another list of items that the data we don't have, like in 2021 salary schedule, non-teaching salary schedule? It's not in the board library. I think the last one is 1819. So there looks like there's some data that we don't have yet.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Nguyen, sorry to answer your question. If there are some things that you would like to see that you can't find or that aren't in the board library, please, email those to me and I can follow up with staff to look that up. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up this email. Y'all don't want to see all the rest of my junk mail. Mr. Goheen, do you want to go ahead and, maybe just start talking as I'm pulling this up about
Sure.
anything you want to share about what was requested?
Yeah, so just sort of as a bit of a background, the budgetary statutes are a little bit spread out in the different areas of the Kansas statutes, so they're not all in one place. As a very general premise, the Board of Education has the statutory obligation to set the budget for the school district. You submit that to the state, typically after not typically, it's got a deadline. The deadline is going to be at first part of August. You have to publish the budget ahead of that time period. It has to be submitted on certain forms. I'm going to point to just a couple statutes just so you know. The main budgetary statute it requires the annual budget is 72-1162, which is the statute right ahead of the one that I've got posted up here. That just says you have to prepare a budget and submit it to the state the same way any other municipality has to submit it, and then cite you to the forms and some of that stuff. 72-1163 is, I believe, the one that Dr. Nguyen wants me to speak on specifically, and that relates to the obligation of what the board's responsibilities are in terms of setting the assessments and needs for the budget. And it provides, as you can see, that each year the Board of Education of a school district shall conduct an assessment of the educational needs of each attendance center in the district. Information obtained from such needs assessment shall be used by the board when preparing the budget for the school district. And then the latter part of this deals again with the forms that are required to be submitted by the board once the budget is approved, including a summary form as well that goes to the state. The other parts of this that sort of relate to how the board's supposed to be looking at or assessing the needs of the district relate to the ROSE capacity standards, which are found in a different set of statutes under the law. Those are over at 72-3218. I know the ROSE capacity standards are already published in the board docs, so I didn't pull that up separately. But the state, as part of the determination or review of the budgets that are submitted and as part of the ongoing funding process, is reviewing how well the finances that are being provided by the state aid funding that's coming through comport with or are correlated to those ROSE standards. And that's part of the state's oversight process, which is in 7251, 72, and a couple of statutes around that. That's the main one. So 725170 and a couple of the other statutes apply as well. The gist of that is that all then gets applied not only to accreditation, but also to how the state is going to examine future funding and discuss that future funding in conjunction or under the underlying premise of the Gannon litigation, which is what sort of set this all as a constitutionally approved budgetary process. So one of the critical factors that you have to be looking at when you're outlining and laying out your budget is looking at the assessments and the needs of each attendance center. Each attendance center is each school within the district. Can also include other aspects, but attendance center is generally decided as each building within the district. And then the board needs to take and be looking at that when it's assessing and preparing the budget. That's not to suggest that the board does this in complete isolation, because obviously they don't. You guys have administrative staff that prepare and provide reports to you, which is part of the process we've been trying to go through, as I understand it. And I would also point you just to a couple other provisions that just talk about what that interaction looks like, so that you know. And you've got your board handbook, which in your appendix at section 5 of that talks about the interaction, the requirement or obligation that the board puts on the superintendent to prepare a detailed budget as a draft for the board to look at and review and analyze and provide input on as it relates to what the board's assessment is. In particular, lays out the notion of providing those goals and directives in the preparation of that. And additionally, USD 500's board policies DB and DC also speak to the notion or the idea of having the superintendent prepare and develop that draft budgetary document for the board. So these are sort of two components, but the ultimate responsibility for the budget preparation the statutory obligation for reviewing and conducting that assessment lays on the Board of Education. So I'm happy to answer any questions on it if I covered that sufficiently or get into more detail, but that's sort of the broad strokes of what the budgetary process looks like. And one of the components you do have is you do have a statutory deadline that will get here faster than people anticipate. So that's going to arrive in late July. You're going to have to make a approved budget that meets these standards based on this assessment, and be able to publish that out so that it can be submitted to the state as an approved budget the first part of August.
And Greg, could you also address the latest legislation, the conference committee report talking about the use of at-risk and high-density at-risk funds?
Yeah, so, and I'm still trying to, in fairness, I'm still trying to actually read the legislation as opposed to just the committee reports, because the legislation itself is somewhat long, and I was actually looking at it yesterday in conjunction with the preparations for a meeting with the union on negotiations, because it has some specific provisions that apply to some of the payouts or salaries too. But the general gist is, in terms of what those at-risk dollars are and the at-risk funding, which is not horribly inconsistent with what the current statutes say, is how that is going to be the focused look at whether those at-risk dollars that are weighted, and USD 500 gets a significant proportion of its state aid funding from those at-risk dollars, how closely tied to the ROSE capacities and that analysis are going to be. And so that is a very critical component of what you need to be looking at in terms of what the dollars look like, and how those lay out in your budget, and the ability down the road then to be assessing accountability for how those dollars are spent in comparison to what the outcomes for those at-risk students are.
And what are longitudinal studies or reports?
Yeah, the longitudinal studies and reports, and those are set forth currently in 725172. I don't know where they're going to end up with the modified statute. I don't think they've taken the House bill that became the law into the specific statutes yet. The longitudinal studies are studies over a period of time. They're supposed to be tracking that improvement for those students with those at-risk dollars, again, trying to show essentially a return on investment, I guess is the best way to put it. The state is trying to track appropriately, and it says not only does that apply to at the state level, so the State Board of Education is supposed to be taking a look at that, providing those reports, but also at a district level as well, or local level, I think is how the statute refers to it. So looking at a correlation or a way to track to see whether the dollars that are being spent, tracking those dollars over time, the programs are how they're being spent over time, and whether that's having an impact on the student achievement per the ROSE capacity standards.
And there will be a legislative post out in 2023.
Yeah, and it was actually, I think, originally supposed to be this year, but I think they put it off because of COVID, as I understand it. But yes, there will be a post audit in 22-23. I think that's statewide, if I recall the statutory language correct.
Well, thank you. And so Mr. Lopez, I asked Greg to explain this because we haven't seen any needs assessments. So that would be one series of documents that we have not seen. We don't have, in my opinion, a good handle on our staffing needs. And we sure haven't had time to discuss at-risk services and what we plan to budget for. So I'm a little concerned that we're not getting the data we need in a comprehensive manner, but it's kind of like drip, drip, drip. And I don't think any of us want to spend our summers this summer doing the budget. So while I'm familiar with the statute, Mr. Goheen's responsibility is to inform us. And so that's why I ask, coming out of his mouth, there's no question of not too much question, Greg, of whether it's valid or not, but that the needs assessment component was also reinforced with the latest legislation. It's nothing new. And so again, the districts have been doing it, but we don't have any data on that. So I don't know when we're going to meet again, but we need to have a number of pieces of data that we don't have.
And one thing, just I can do this. I didn't think to do it ahead of the meeting today, and I apologize for not thinking about that. But I can put the committee report and the latest statute up in board docs if you guys want to review it, or email it out. It doesn't matter. The committee report's a summary at a pretty high level. KSB's got a pretty good summary out too, but some of the details are actually still in the statute as opposed to what's actually in the committee report or in the even the KSB report is not as precise as what the statutory language is. And it might be worth a read of the actual statute itself.
And I would like to note that as the Finance Committee Chair, since the duties was taken from us and taken over by the full board, there was an outline of when we had scheduled tasks done. However, since there was so much, many emails sent to the president, then he had to take it over so that it would be more streamlined. And what I encouraged when we had the Finance Committee is that, if something was requested or something did need to be reviewed, then we would have that opportunity before the meeting for there to be submissions. But we talked at the last meeting with Dennis, and it was explained that they would cover and talk to us about the needs assessment. It was covered that we have access to all of you to be able to go back and look at previous data. And I would ask, did board members actively go out and all of you to start doing your research, to take advantage of the tools that they've offered us over and over again, so that we can do our due diligence? Yes, as a board, we do have a responsibility, but we also to ask questions and get to know it, but we also have the responsibility to do things outside of the meeting. This should not be the only meeting where we're coming and looking at numbers and getting data to see what our schools are doing. It's our responsibility to go out with the resources and tools that have been given to us, that we asked for, that we are paying for, to actively keep that in mind. So I think that's important as we have these discussions. What are our responsibilities as a board? What are our responsibilities as it comes to asking questions? Are we truly doing our due diligence?
And then I would also recommend that we make sure that we look at the board handbook, which is the guideline for us to be able to know about the budget.
So
this is Yolanda. Thank you, Mr. Goheen, for going through that. That did help me. I go through a lot of different budget seasons. And so being able to understand and actually connect the dots, it did help me regardless of what materials are out there. I still needed that overview to be able to connect some of the dots. So I appreciate that explanation.
Thank you, everybody. All excellent points. And I think you're right, Dr. Nguyen, that none of us want to have a meeting every single day throughout the rest of the summer to carry out the budget. And so I would actually, that's a great point. And I think to get us back on a schedule and on track to make sure we're making the best use of our time, because it's already 3:30, right? There's no way we're going to get through all of these department budgets even today, and it would probably still take us another 2, 3, 4 meetings to get through 20 plus departments. So I would actually suggest a slight pivot to the way we move today's meeting and future meetings, right, around this. Now I understand looking at the already approved current year department budgets is important. We all have those. So I would ask the board, instead of trying to go through all of them in a series of 4 or 5 meetings, whatever that might be, we have potentially, could we go through, use all of you, use those department budgets, and maybe ask specific questions of any of the departments that we might have, and hold one more meeting to do that specifically, but then transition to that next phase, right? Building out the budget for the next year. So using that information, any other information that we might request from staff to help us build that out. And I know for a fact that staff are already working on, based on those needs assessment from those schools, based on information from the state that they've received about the budget, both this year and next year, to build that budget out. And they're working with Dr. Miguel, superintendent, cabinet level, to build that out. So I would be very open to pivoting a little bit, rather than going through all of the individual department budgets that are going to take several more meetings to get through, that we may take some time today to go through some of that, but talk about the process that we want to take, look at the timeline, and then maybe take one more meeting to go through those department budgets, but specific questions that we might have that we could send to staff ahead of time to work through those, but then really pivot to next year's budget, right? And building that out and talk about our goals and our priorities, and let staff work through some of that so that they can present, if I understand under policy D, B, or DC, Greg, that the superintendent will present a budget for the board to consider, and then we work through some of those items with staff. So just throwing that out there as kind of a pivot for us, rather than scheduling 5 more meetings to go through these department budgets.
I think one thing, Randy, that would be important for the board is, if that's the direction you go, is to coupling that with, one thing going through the department budgets as they currently exist and evaluating, and then that's got a benefit to it. But I do think as you're looking toward the proposed budget and what that looks like, you need to be looking at the needs assessments for the different attendance areas at the same time.
A thumbs up from Dr. Yeager. Any thoughts on that? Again, and we're, I'll do whatever the majority board wants to do. We'll follow that direction. But I'm just thinking in terms of our time and timeline, and working backwards from the timeline and things that we have to get done to prepare the budget for next year.
Okay, so are we going to get the needs assessment? Are we, as statute requires, and when?
Mr. President, the needs assessments are done. We can send them to you on Monday.
Well, that can move that along.
From a statutory standpoint, I think that's important for the board to have in front of them and be able to be reviewing. So if those are ready to be provided to the board, I do think that I understand the desire to go through the current budgets and evaluate that part of it, but the needs assessment is the one that's specific under the statute. So I think it's important to get that in front of the board as soon as possible.
Thank you,
We also need a salary schedule of 9 teachers for 20 and 21.
Mr. Lopez, we can share that with you very quickly, but I just wanted to point out for the board, if they wanted to look sooner, it is available on the district website under the Human Resources tab at the top of the screen.
Thank you, Brad. I was going to say, I think that's where we put it at. So that's when you're talking about the classified staff, it's out on our website. But we're happy to provide it. We're happy to provide it another way if you'd like. We can send it via email.
We just need to have it so we can consider what.
It's out there. So but I can send it.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Tishman. Thank you, Brad. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sending that to the full board, or you can send it to Ms. Smith and Leslie if you don't mind pushing that to the full board and Mr. Goheen, so we have it. Thank you. Okay. Other questions or clarifications or things that we might need?
Greg, can you share with us as far as a deadline for, we're still negotiating teachers' salary. How about non-teachers? What are our deadlines there?
So your deadlines in terms of we've done it different ways in different years. So sometimes you guys have decided classified or non-teacher, non-certified salaries as part of the budgetary process and just had that approved or designed. Other years, you guys set monies aside for that purpose, but have left that decision until after you've closed the negotiations with the teachers. In other words, waited to make changes to other position salaries until after your contract is reached negotiations reached conclusion. You have an agreement with the union, and then done salaries. So in some years, when you've done that, if it goes past the deadline and you reach an agreement, say we reach an agreement in September with the teachers, which I'm not remotely suggesting will be that far out, but it's happened that far out in the past. Then what's typically happened is if the board didn't already go ahead and set salaries and do raises or increases for classified, we do that at the same time, and then everything would be retroactive to the start of the fiscal year, which is July 1. The other way to do it is to consider and go ahead and decide classified, non-certified salaries as part of the budget process based upon your assessments or reports from the different departments, and then go ahead and make those effective July 1. If we have the teacher's contract done by July 1, they would get at the same point. If not, then whatever point the teacher's contract is done, they would get retroactive to the start of the calendar year, or not calendar year, the fiscal year for the school district.
But specifically today, there is a deadline, if I understand your past comments, that we have had conversation on looking again and reviewing administrative salaries. So therefore.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dr. Wynn, I misunderstood your question. I apologize. So that's just the general sense, and salary increases or changes could obviously be done at a later point in terms of by mutual agreement. So for your administrator contracts are governed by a continuous contract provision. So if there are going to be changes made to administrators' contracts, and if those administrators are in the final year of their contract, that's the year in which you can make those changes, then those have to be done prior to the third Friday in May, which I believe is next Friday, because if not, then the current contract is automatically renewed for the next year. So if there are changes to provisions in terms of what the current compensation or benefits or other terms of the contract that are in existence that the board wants to do, those have to be done prior to next Friday, and the administrators who are subject to those contracts notified so that those changes can be made. Otherwise, the current contract language, current contract benefits, the current contract salary automatically renews for next year, with the ability still to make a mutual change to the contract, which is typically how any raises are done. If they're done after the teacher's contract's done, those could still be done by mutual agreement, but any changes to the contract after next Friday would have to be by mutual agreement rather than unilaterally.
Okay. Thank you. So in view of that, Mr. Lopez, I'd like for us to continue our discussion that we started, in a year ago, looking at then the spreadsheet that you provided, and then hopefully move on to some departments.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wynn. So, and for board members, we're referring to the Excel spreadsheet that we forwarded to all of you. I believe it was yesterday when I sent it to everyone, with the updated administrative contract, salaries, benefits. So hopefully you've had some time to review that. There haven't been really any changes from the previous year, except for maybe specific staff members who maybe are no longer here, or new staff members who were hired. But hopefully you've had some time to review that. So I guess I would open with any questions, if there are any questions to that document, or specifically regarding the administrator salaries, contracts.
Well, effort to save time. On the first page where it says outline of benefits, I don't know if we need to have give people time to get there. Whoever is the explainer, where it says the top chief deputy superintendent, is this the chief of police? Does that mean the chief of police? Who is
Superintendent is a role that we don't have currently. Dr. Nguyen?
I'm sorry?
We don't have that role currently filled. I think if
No. I'm sorry, I just need to know when the black header, when it says chief deputy superintendent, I know what the word superintendent means. And I know what the word.
Okay. Oh, all right. The chiefs are the chief of human resources, chief of finance, a chief operation officer, chief of staff.
Oh,
deputies.
okay.
Right. That's who we're talking about in that line.
Okay. And then where the third, where it says the asterisk, no cost at enrollment, explain that, please.
I'm going to get my spreadsheet. Does somebody have a spreadsheet that they could share? Or are we going to just go off of our individual? Let me see here.
Which page is that, Dr. Nguyen? I can pull it up.
The very first outline of benefits, very first.
Okay, thank you.
What is the question?
Of the third box for director, assistant director, coordinator, where it says dental, vision, the asterisk, no cost at enrollment. What's the asterisk mean? You have a high, you have a low plan.
On the director, I think Jody is on here. I'm going to ask her to make sure, or Brad, but what I believe that means is that the person does not get charged for it, the district pays for it directly. Am I correct in saying that, Jody? And
that's correct, Kelly.
Yes.
For directors and assistant directors, that administrative level, we are provided the dental and vision insurance at no cost.
So who would take a low if they could take it high?
Well, there's different coverages. So I think one of them has orthodontic care, one of them doesn't. So if you don't think you're going to need orthodontics, you don't have children or whatever, you may go ahead and take the low.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr.
And then
President.
could you go over to the third, and then I'll be the last question. Could you go over to the fourth tab? And what is the column in, like Nancy?
And that's a supplemental assignment 3.
those are, Jody, I'm going to ask you again. These are additional stipends for additional work, as I understand. Is that correct?
I don't have access to what you're looking
I'm sorry.
at.
It's supplemental. There's various supplemental assignment pay for certain people. And then
So this person is a assistant principal middle school, and there's a base pay, and then they get a supplemental pay for assistant principal middle school?
I would have to look at it. It's hard to.
do you want, why don't we just come back to, yeah.
Okay.
We can bring you an answer back to that, but these are, we basically took it right out of our pay system.
Okay. I'll come back with different questions.
Yeah.
For other people can ask questions.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we renew the administrative contract for next year.
There's a motion to renew administrator contracts for next year.
Second.
And a second. So I'll open up for discussion or questions.
This is, I don't know. Okay, this is Wanda Brownlee Page. My issue, and I think with the exception of the superintendent, that every employee, irregardless of their status, should get the same insurance policy. The basic one, that we should do away with the car allowance, the educational stipend, whatever teachers got, I remember when I taught, when I got my master's, I got one increment. I moved up a step, should apply the same to everybody else. So I have an issue with that.
Okay, and the reason why I'm suggesting that we go ahead and accept it, and I heard Mr. Goheen mention about the third Friday of May, we need to make that decision. We have a lot of things right now that we're dealing with pending with the pandemic and trying to get everything back in place. We've just chosen our next superintendent. The lateness of this is just too much. We're right now dealing with the budget that we have to try to do that. If we're going to make any changes, once we get back to normalcy, I would suggest that we do it, as Wanda has often said, early enough whereas we can address it. Let's do it next year. But right now, we have a lot that we have to do. And so why would we make any changes in relation to the contracts that are being presented to these people to fulfill their duties in the jobs that they're being hired for? If there's going to be anything, again, I recommend let's do it next year when we will have more than enough time between after the third Friday in May leading up to the next year, where we can take our time, look at everything in a most open and honest way and make any changes if we feel that we need to. This is just my recommendation. We got too much that we're dealing with right now. One of the things we have not addressed as a board, and I'm just throwing it out there, about the library. That's still pending. We haven't looked at it. So we got a lot of things that we have to address, but I'm suggesting let's move past this. We got enough time to get ready for next year.
Well, I respectfully disagree with you, because that's what we were told last year. And it just keeps piling up and we keep moving it back. And then one complaint that we have been crucified on, every time that state legislature gets together, they look at all our high salaries, and it seems like most of the cuts affect everybody at the bottom. And I know May 3rd is next week, but it doesn't take but a second to say, no, everybody gets the same insurance, the educational stipend. We're not doing this, we're not doing that. That could be done, because this is never ending.
Can I remind everybody that we did do the market compensation surveys, and which you all have that information, and we're happy to go through it again. But it says very clearly where we stand on compensation for these same people, and we are not overpaying anybody. And this is the same structure that every district follows. So if it's something you want to take in consideration going forward, but otherwise you would be reducing people's pay. So I just want to be very clear that that's what is going to happen if you I just want to make sure you know.
Yeah, I know that. And my argument against that, we're not talking about somebody making $15 an hour. We're talking about people who are getting paid. They're not getting 2 cents. And I think at some point, if we're talking about cut, we never seem to cut at the top. It's always at the bottom where the kids and the people who are making less. So I don't have a problem with cutting at the top. There should be some cut at the top.
We haven't cut anybody. We've increased pay. I mean, I'm just saying, we haven't cut anybody's pay. We've actually increased people's pay. And we would be making a recommendation again this year, just so you're aware, because I know you guys asked us to look at it. We will be making recommendations for some additional pay increases for our classified staff, because that is why we hired Rachel Swartz again, is to look at market comp. We have done this analysis. I'm happy again to keep going through the examples, because I just want us to make the right decision. It needs to be based on what is really right in the market for those roles. So I'm just saying, I'm happy to give you examples if that would help clarify things, but we would not be
on where has there been a cut? Where have we cut out salaries that impacted our students? Because I don't want anyone watching today to think that we've cut something away from our students. So have we cut something that I'm not aware of that it has impacted our students? I think we increased textbooks, we increased salary, wraparound support. We've been improving that. So I guess I'm not understanding. Would you clarify, Wanda, what you meant by cutting?
What I'm saying is every year we get crucified at the state legislature when they pop up all these used salaries. I'm not saying people shouldn't get paid, but come on. People at the top could take a cut. We could use that money to try to hire more paras, more teachers. We have people in our special ed department using equipment that's not satisfactory. They should have electric lifts instead of the manual lifts. There's a whole lot of stuff.
So I want to bring our attention back to where we cut the human resource department out. We cut the Title IV funding out. We didn't have anybody qualified in those positions and they cut them out. That was detrimental to our student. To not have someone strictly dedicated to human resources, that's why it was such a mess. Why was our Title IV funding not used appropriately? We didn't have anyone there. So in the past, that's what happened. We went in, and I'm saying before me, I was not here. Before me, we did not even have a true person who could even analyze human resource payment, human resource structure, to give us advice on the things that we're complaining about. So when we talk about cutting it, that means less quality. Who would replace and do the work? And, Dr. Stubblefield, I believe when she comes in and through the KASB, they can help analyze and maybe make recommendations on our structure. That's a very strong suit of hers. And looking at Randy, I will shut up. But the reality is, that is my point.
No, I wasn't trying to cut you off, Dr. Yeager. I'm just going to try to bring us back, right? So there's a motion, there's a second. I appreciate the conversation, but I want us to focus on the conversation that's at hand. And I think you're right. I think I'll just insert my 2 cents here too. I think it's I would not be in favor of essentially reducing salaries of our staff, especially after a year like this year, for any of our staff. But I would not be in favor of reducing the staff salary after all the work that they've put in this year. And I would be in favor of allowing time for our new superintendent to come in and help us analyze that and look through that and then come back with some recommendations. I think we have the salary comp analysis where we see where we're still underpaying in some positions. We've got a lot of really good information. I don't think it's prudent of us to just come through and reduce salaries for staff after a year like this year. Dr. Wren, I see your hand up, please.
Let me just, again, I'm not looking at a salary. I'm looking at a fringe benefit. When a year ago, to respond to Ms. Drew, I took the lead in suggesting cost savings in shaving some benefits. The pushback was that same thing. Let's look at them. All right. So then when we looked at the car allowance, the car, 100 car, the fleet, when the response was provided that the IIOs have to have the cars to immediately go to the schools. Well, it appears that the individuals get a car allowance and also there's an automobile. So it could be perceived as double dipping. I'm not saying reducing salaries. On the car allowance alone, I think there should be some adjustment because there's a car allowance given and there was also a response that there's a automobile for that same position. I don't believe that is a good use of dollars. I think the equalization of the educational stipend is that when people get the degree, that's when you get the stipend, but that the teachers and others don't get it every year. So that is not a reduction in salary. Yes, it does reduce revenue in the area of car allowance and in the area of stipend. The insurance, we've had this conversation before. I think Ms. Humphreys has also had some input, but that in the attempt to equalize all the staff, everyone gets the same basic coverage, and then you're able to purchase the additional. But that is an attempt to equalize. That's not, it's how you frame things too. But the reality is now you're not slashing and burning people's salaries.
Well, you are.
I would
take compensation based upon what they're going to get reimbursement for. So therefore, they may accept a smaller salary because they're getting a different benefits package. And that loops into the total compensation package. Again, I have an HR background, so I have a little.
Oh, we understand that.
But I'm just explaining my perspective. So if someone takes a lower salary, it may have more benefits. Therefore, that will impact the salary, which means if we're not competitive to where they can go, we have great people walking out the door. Now, not saying that, that's a risk that we want to take. But again, as Randy has said, after COVID, after many positions are opened up, and it's about the kids. When we think back, how will this directly impact the kids? Our IIOs are there on the ground, boots running. Anything happen, they're up there snapping a hurry. After school, before school, working extra and overtime. So when we discount maybe, okay, this is a car allowance versus driving your own car, sometimes they drive from their own house. Sometimes they have to, use that automobile. But again, the manager over that area is responsible for ensuring that it's used in good measure and good standard. And they also are proving it before the check is reimbursed to the staffing. So it's not like they're just doing it willy-nilly. We hire these people so that they can truly be managed by a manager.
You get a car allowance and you get a car. That's double. That's all I'm saying. You get a car allowance and you get a car. That's
I don't believe that the IOs, the people you're talking about, are not using our cars. They are using their vehicles.
What was explained when we had
I
that
think,
discussion.
Dennis can answer that, but I don't want to, I'm just saying, I think they are using their own vehicles. And all of us use our own vehicles. I do not use any district vehicle.
So all we have to do is play the tape back. That was the explanation.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm gonna jump in here real quick. I'm sorry. Just to reiterate, I think, and Dr. Nguyen, I hear what you're saying, but I think at the end of the day, right, it's all compensation, whether it's tied in as benefits or other. But it all goes to. I know that's what
we understand that. We are familiar. This is not our first time talking benefits and compensation. We understand that.
I know. I'm just clarifying for those that may have misunderstood or misheard. But it is all tied. It is all compensation. And so if we remove one of those benefits, you ultimately are removing part of that total compensation of the staff. I'm just making sure.
Okay, so let me understand this. In a budgetary discussion, the desire to determine a budget, the reaction is that when we're discussing salaries, compensation, there's no will to perhaps discuss a reduction of certain benefits where there seems to be duplication in an effort to utilize resources in a pandemic responsibly. Am I understanding that correctly, or is that too long of a sentence?
No, I think that's unfair to characterize it that there's no will to discuss. Exactly. That's why we're looking
at the pushback is like, the pushback appears that way. So, but that's my position, that there appears to be duplication in car allowance and automobile in our fleet, that it appears to equalize, especially on the stipend, all faculty, all staff. When you get that degree, you get the compensation.
I think Ms. Drew called for the vote.
Before I just want one statement, because I love everything you all just said. Keep that in mind when you deal with the teachers. Listen to the spirit. Keep that in mind when you deal with the teachers. That's
It's
all
so
I'm saying.
unfortunate. That's so unfortunate that you would
Well,
think that we don't
No,
have.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. Miss
Keep that
Smith,
in mind when you
Miss-
deal with the teachers.
Smith.
That's all
Never
I'm
said
saying.
enough.
Miss Smith,
Good
would you
for
Yes, it
please,
is. Yes, it
Ms.
is. Keep
Humphries?
that in
Miss
mind.
Smith, would you
Like,
please,
really?
Dr. Yeager and
That
Miss
in mind.
Page, thank you
Ms.
both.
Humphries, you don't have any input?
I just wanted to clarify one thing.
Can we vote?
Ms. Humphries has had a position in the past. I don't believe she's had an opportunity, and I don't have a clue what it is.
Ms. Humphries, please, and if you have something to share, please do, and then we'll move forward with the vote, Ms. Smith.
Okay. As I understand it, the people who get the family medical, they get the value of it. So they get their salary, and let's grab one that says they get like $30,000 as the medical. They get the value of that on their paycheck, and then they turn around and they buy their insurance. Okay, so if we take away their family, the value of their family insurance, we're going to have to turn around and put that back as their salary, which would make it would look cleaner showing it as their total salary instead of showing it as salary and fringe benefit. It would look cleaner to people to show that they're really just getting their base insurance policy like everyone else. But we're going to have to up their salary. So there's going to be two things that we have to do, not just one. We can't just take away the family insurance. So it's a two-step process. It's not as simple as it sounds. So we really need to think that out. I wish we had addressed this in January, not now. So I see both sides of it. So, and we do have the superintendent coming in. We do have to address this because we know there's negotiations with teachers coming up. But we do have this deadline by Friday. More than one step has to be taken. We have another comp study coming up. So we need to think complicated, not simple. That's what I've got to say.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Ms. Smith, would you please do a roll call vote? Thank you.
Yolanda Clark.
And just to clarify, because the motion was put on the table a long time ago.
Sorry, I should have
clarified.
I'm sorry.
Just to clarify, the motion is, Ms. Drew, I think you made it that we go ahead and approve contracts.
Correct. So we're going to renew administrative contracts. The motion is to renew the contracts as they are, renew the administrative contracts. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yes. Yes, Leslie.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries.
Janie Humphries, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, no.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, no, and Mr. Lopez, I will hold you to the fact that we will start on everything in January, if not before. No.
Dr. Yeager.
Dr. Yeager, yes, and all employees are valued by the board. All, every single one are valued by this board.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, board, for that thoughtful conversation. Yeah, I mean, I think this all is a part of the conversation that needs to take place when we're looking at our budget, right? So I do appreciate the conversation. Dr. Nguyen, thank you. God willing, hopefully I'm still around in January live. We will continue to have these conversations. So thank you. All right. So we'll move forward. I know staff was prepared to continue to review department budgets. Is it the will of the board to continue down that road to do some of those today? We have about an hour left. We'll probably get through a few, but I do think it's important for us to think about next steps, right? So we'll get a few department budgets today. Again, a reminder, these are already approved current year department budgets that we're reviewing. My suggestion would be that we do some of that today, absolutely. But then maybe we schedule next Friday to have specific questions. So allow board members to review the budgets that you have. We're going to get the needs assessment as well, and the other information that was requested. And to come next Friday prepared to discuss specific departments that we have questions about, or specific questions about the needs assessment and that conversation, rather than spend another 3, 4, 5 meetings reviewing all the department budgets. That would just be a suggestion, but I'm open to others. Ms. Drew.
You do know graduations start next week. And
Yeah.
Fairfax Learning Center graduation is at 7 o'clock next Friday.
Bridges.
Miss Page is going to be there. So we're limited with time.
You're
Just
right.
want to
Thank you.
mention that.
I was going to say that I don't think that it's fair for some to present and others not to present. Also, how about a recorded presentation? You know, if they wanted to walk through their recorded presentation on Zoom or something and send it to the board, that way they're walking through explaining each area. That would give us a view as to how they may explain it. And then if we have questions, we could respond already in advance. So you would have those questions and compile them, and then they would already be able to address those questions.
I would like to propose, if they're on here now, let's get through as many as we can, and then we can go from there. If we got an hour, make the hour work.
All right, well, why don't we go that route? We were, I know some staff were prepared to present today. Mr. Covington, you still with us there? I see you. Why don't we go ahead and move forward with some department budgets today? Those that we were prepared to cover anyways, if you don't mind. And if there's any, and then also any additional information you might want to provide or share, if there's anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Covington, about the budget process and what we know or don't know, or what we need to be conscious of as we're moving forward.
Well, as far as the budget process, the plan is to present superintendent's budget to you all at the next regularly scheduled board meeting, which is the 25th. And from there, you all would have a time until mid-July to review what the superintendent has recommended, to where we can start putting together the final document in the Form 99 to be brought back to you guys to approve. Now, don't forget, we have to go up to KSDE to let them review it. So we're going to have to build that time in also. But we're ready at the will of the board to do what you all want. And like I said, that time between May 25th and probably mid-July, that's when the budget is in the hand of the board. And we'll be at your discretion as to what all y'all want to do. And so continuing on down our list, next up is Dira. And Tracy, are you sharing? We can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I will share my screen. If Mr. Ben Price is with us.
Yes. Good afternoon. So included in this proposal are funds requested for the FastBridge Year 2 contract to meet state universal screening and dyslexia screening requirements, certain pre-college and career-oriented tests and those related supplies, as well as assessments for the advanced courses that we offer, as well as funds for the Qualtrics survey platform to support the comprehensive survey research done in the district here. And that's big, broad, and generally under the supplies and purchase services together. Possible travel and professional development might include the American Education Research Association conference, if not hybrid or virtual next year, and if the timing is right as well as memberships and perhaps some sponsored related PD and training for interested staff in that area as well. Salaries cover 2 data facilitators and 1 program evaluator who together provide assessment project management, backbone support, assessment support, research, and evaluation and assessment analysis, and also the collection and organization and dissemination of that analysis across the district. And there are no equipment purchase plans for 21-22. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the DARE department?
What are these specific titles and salaries of the certified line item, please?
Sure, and I might defer to Tracy as well on this one. The titles under the DARE department, they're data integrity facilitators, and there are 2 of them, and they're present as 1 program evaluation specialist, and then there's the director.
And what are the specific salaries, please?
I may have to defer to Tracy on that one, or get you the information. I do not have that in front of me.
Mr. Lopez, moving forward, I'd like to see the salaries actually identified. Administration is clear, but when they're clumped together, we don't know what they are. Thank you.
Yes, and that information is in all of you if you ever like to look at it.
Tracy, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. The salaries are specifically listed in all of you, but we can share anything you'd like to see.
Thank you. Yes, that would be the request.
Okay. Next we have PE, music, and fine arts. If Jody is with us.
Is this microphone working?
Yes.
We're good? Okay. So, Tracy, I might need a little bit of help on the supplies. I'm not sure what gets dumped into this out of our B+, but when we look at the proposal for next year, it's what we've been asking for in the past, the $50,000 on supplies and equipment. And if you look back to the 19-20, it's very similar. And so the thing I might need help with today, Tracy, if we look in the middle as to what we were doing this year, you're going to see a difference here in PE in this middle column, as well as when we move to music and our fine arts, in that we purchased many supplies for individual students, especially for visual art, which we'll see on the next page. And so we spent about the same overall out of our budget, not going in the red, just reallocating some of the funds for our remote learning and then for some supply needs that we had once we came back. So going forward, you can see the $100,000. That's typically what we spend for PE over the past several years. So that is a static amount. The middle column, it looks a little weird. The next page, if we can go there, Tracy, looks even a little weirder, if you will. In that, we can look at the supply line in the middle column, $469,250. And it was kind of a proud thing that we were able to purchase individual supplies to send home to children for their visual art courses across the district. So that I wanted to point that out as you look at the 3 columns. As we compare 2021-22, the salaries are different on this page in that we added 2 instructional coaches. And so in this line item is a coordinator, 3 instructional coaches instead of 1, 4 shop members, and a secretary at our office. And so that's why the difference in the salaries. So we did add those 2 positions recently. And that's really the major difference between the first column and the third column in the music and fine arts snapshot that you see here.
Jody, I have a question for you. This
Okay.
is Janie.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was the first year we were not asking for instrument rental from our students. I believe it was, $35 a year?
Correct.
How are we replenishing our musical instruments?
So with the cancellation of user fees, and we also canceled art course fee in that, the board and Dennis were generous enough to make sure that, as an example, art supplies are purchased for kids where they'd have a small fee before, or that user fee. They put money in our budget to cover what was being paid for out of user fees. As another example, where Dennis was able to add some to our budget was the transportation line. A lot of the user fees they were dedicated to extra trips and busing, and he gave us, I want to say it was a little over 70,000 in that line to make sure that kids have those extra opportunities.
Are we going to be able to sustain our instrument supply without user fees?
In the way that the budget was, yes, we are. Dennis sat down with me that August that they did cancel the fees to see what the needs were. We pulled numbers, we pulled the data right out of Infinite Campus to see how many art students we had, how many music students, and he came through.
Okay, because we've always been very proud that our elementary students have been able to have musical instruments.
Yes.
And not all of the districts surrounding us have been able to do that because we have no music stores.
Yes.
Around here, and $35 a year is a very low rental price for musical instruments.
Yes. In the retail shops, it's more like $35 a month. And we are the only district with such a widespread program for our students and our maintenance shop as well. So that's a wonderful service that we give to our families.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we can keep providing that for our students.
So far, it's been great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So is it in purchase services, supplies, or equipment? Where is that rental fee again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The money that was provided by you and by Dennis, a lot of that here is in equipment to purchase new instruments, and then some of it in supplies for, when we're talking about music specifically, maybe it's the shoulder rest for the violin would be a supply, or the musical instrument is the actual violin or the trumpet. So part of it is in supplies, some of it is in equipment. And then he also, when we did the budget, we looked at the different line items. So sometimes that user fee might go to, let's say, that bus trip. And so we put some of the money in transportation.
Okay.
So it was divided.
I guess this question for Dennis. Is there another budget that has these items broken out by line item?
They are broken out, Dennis. They are broken out in my B+. I can see them all line by line. So I know they're in there.
In Alibu, they're broken out where you can see before it's summed up what each of the lines are.
Okay.
But if you look at those three purchase service supplies and equipment in the 2021 and 2022 year, the three lines are close to the same amount of money. And so that was those fees that we moved between the three, depending on what they needed. And see that large number of supplies in 2021 is because that was the first year that we done away with those fees. So we had to bump up all those supplies. So
that's a generic question. I'm sorry, this is a generic question. If we're going to, Mr. Lopez and Greg, if we're going to reference Alibu, then it needs to be in the same, for lack of a better word, screen as we are reviewing and looking at budget building. Because this process is not, in my opinion, clear enough for a board to know exactly what you are proposing and what we're approving. That's just my opinion, and so that's why I'm asking you, where is the specific positions and salaries, and that's moving forward throughout all the budgets departments. So thank you.
And I would recommend that we as a board, when this information is sent out, notification given to us to go to Allaview to look at the specifics if we have any questions about anything. Other than that, I think we possibly need to make a motion that we as a board should go to the Allaview so that the staff will not have to create any unnecessary information.
And Ms. Drew, just with respect, it's not how budgets are built, but I'm not debating you. I just made a request.
Okay, I appreciate you.
Excuse me, I haven't finished. Thank you. That when you present us salaries, at least some annotation, it can be an asterisk. You identify how many positions and what their salary. Thank you.
I would like to clarify, do we need, maybe some board members need a direct walkthrough again with all of you to be able to clearly see that information or to highlight it side by side. I'm not understanding why. I'm just encouraging us. I agree, Ms. Drew. We can look at all of you and pull it up and be able to see those things. So I'm not quite understanding, while we're not doing our due diligence as well. So again, I'm asking, can we please do our due diligence or get, additional support if we're not comfortable with all of you to be able to see these things? Because it's one board member asking, does the other 6 want that information as well? Do we want them to go back and have to go through that? I do not. So is it a majority of the board or is it one?
I would like to see the information on these reports.
So why are we paying for all of you when we ask them to do it? Well, again, that's only 2 out of 5. So anyway, I think we can continue. We should continue on.
Continue with the department budgets. I think Allaview is there for all board members to view. If we have specific questions, we can always contact Mr. Covington or Ms. Kaiser if there are some specific questions or if we need a little help with Allaview. Thank you. Thank you all for your suggestions. So any other further questions for Ms. Lynn? All right, thank you, Jody.
Next, we have Doug talking about the operations and maintenance budget.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Doug Clemens, Director of Physical Properties. Can everybody hear me okay? I know sometimes it's a bit of a problem. We're good. I wanted to give you a little bit of a rundown about our facilities department. As you hopefully know, that our goal is to always provide clean, warm, dry, and safe learning and work environments for our students and staff. So we are charged with overseeing the maintenance, improvements, repairs of existing facilities, and of course we're involved in the planning and construction of new facilities. The district consists of about 70 properties, a little over actually 70 properties, about 65 buildings that contain 3.7 million square feet. We have 2.8 million square feet of roofs that we take care of, 500 acres. We have a lot of things that we take care of. Typically, we receive on average about 1,200 work orders per month, which are distributed to all of our various crafts and trades. And those include our plumbers, electricians, carpenters, painters, pipe fitters, and custodian staff. Altogether, we have about 280 people, 55 shop people, and 225 custodians. The shop includes a director, assistant director, the coordinator of custodial services, and we have 5 office staff. We were asked to talk about some of our contracts. Of course, here in our facilities department, we have several big ticket contracts that we put out on a fairly regular basis. Those would include things like your disposal services is a big one with waste management, elevator service and inspection, mowing, landscaping, alarm inspections, and the monitoring of all of the alarms throughout all the district. We have a BAS or building automation system software support contract, pest management contract, water treatment, which is, my apologies. Water treatment that for our cooling towers and the cooling systems in some of the buildings. Then, of course, chiller and boilers. We also have several support or service contracts that we bid out to support our trades and crafts when needed, not necessarily all the time. Typically, and I agree with some of the board members who in the past have talked about the efficiencies of doing things in-house, which I agree with 100%. I know that when we do work internally, we do that work for about 50 to 60% of the cost of having to contract that work out. So we try to do it internally as much as possible. As far as the budget, I've kept it relatively flat, really flat this year. And I'll, along with your current or recent conversation, I'll have to apologize. My Allaview budget, there's a lot of different categories. It's fairly complicated and it's been condensed here. And I can't say that I know where each and every part and piece goes in to make up these categories that you see here. I'll have to defer to Brad and Tracy to help me out with that if there's specific questions. Again, I have kept that flat. As far as the certified salaries, I think somebody talked about that last time. And Brad, you'll have to remind me. I don't remember. I don't have certified staff. I think that is basically the administration salaries that you're looking at there. And then everybody else, we're all classified.
Yeah, the certified salaries is probably just now being in Allaview, the object codes are more meaningful than they may have been in the past when we were working on spreadsheets. So it's showing as certified, but I can try to find out which exact staff that is for you.
All right. Like I said, I've kept the budget flat for this year. We've done fairly well over the last several years of trying not to increase our budget. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Yeah, Doug, if I may also add, we do need to recategorize that. Where it shows certified, it really is like, it really is professional in the department level.
Okay.
Wayne, this is Wanda Page. In regard to COVID with air filters and air conditioning systems, are we doing anything different to try to, we have the newer buildings, and what are we doing with the old to make the environment more conducive?
We have increased the amount of outside air. There's really kind of limited stuff that we can do with those. I know there's a proposal that includes some additional filtrations that's coming up. But as far as trying to increase the amount of outside air, which brings its own other set of issues and concerns. You know, you're bringing in a lot of allergens and outside contaminants, but increasing the rate of replacement of our various filters.
And then I had a question about Carl B. Bruce.
Yes.
I don't know if this would fall into this category. What are they going to create them a track? I was told, I heard it at one meeting. Did they try to build the track for them, or a play area for their football team, soccer team? And if there's any other school like that,
I know that. Ms. Page, let me answer that, Doug.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Page, yes, we are having our architect look at that green area out to the side of the school to turn that into athletic field with a small track that goes around. It won't be a competition track because there's not enough space over there and there's not enough space to do all the field events, but there will be a practice field and some athletic fields to that in that big green area.
Would that be something that's coming up in 21, 22?
Well, we got the architect working on the design right now.
Okay.
So I don't know if we can get it finished before the start of school year, but we are working on it right now.
I didn't know if there was any other school that was built and have the same problem. I don't.
Well, most of the middle schools don't have practice fields, and a lot of them don't even have an area to have a practice field.
Okay.
One of the other problems we're having right now is trying to get a softball field at Harmon for the girls softball team. The space that we had does not allow, it's not big enough. So we running into that, and I brought before you all that we are working to try to get that Eisenhower complex to be a KCKPS complex, that we can move a lot of activities over to there. But that's in the very infinite stage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Doug, how did you explain your $3 million increase in the classified salaries?
That was my question. 300,000.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing the the $3 million, that again, I'll have to kind of defer and see what all got put into that. Tracy, does that include the amount that we normally put in the, are you showing what's normally put over in that, the capital budget? Is that why that's showing that way? Can't hear you.
I'll have to look into that specifically. It could be that I'm sorry, can you hear me, Doug?
I can, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, and I do apologize, but we did, the board did adjust quite a few salaries this last year, and I don't know what percentage that is. I'm sorry, Tracy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Right, that could be part of it, as well as if we reduce the purchase services, if we were, hiring any outside agencies, and now we're hoping to be able to go ahead and fill those positions on our own. But I can get back to the board on that final answer.
The short answer, Dr. Nguyen, is I have actually requested some new positions for custodial supervision. One kind of a supervisor per high school cluster. My personal opinion that we're a little light on our supervision of custodial services. 2 of those positions, I reduced the rest of my budget enough to incorporate that. 2 of the positions, and I don't know if we've talked over when those will be discussed, that was only going to be, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the amounts, $150,000 for those 2 with benefits and everything. So I'm sorry, we'll have to look and see why that's showing that $3 million increase in that.
Yeah, and Doug, those are not included.
Those aren't in here.
Right, those are the case for investments that we'll be bringing back to the board.
Okay.
But my guess is offhand that we are reducing the purchase services and increasing the classified salaries, but I will confirm that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
And Doug, I'm sorry, I had a question. It appeared, my opinion, that we need more janitors. When I retired in 2017, they had already cut them back, and they're struggling to do what they need to do, and COVID was difficult. So since we have the ESSER money, I don't know if some of that can be used to hire people in terms of maintenance to help keep things clean, but there is a need for more janitorial workers.
I won't necessarily disagree with that, and we've talked about that before. I think there's probably a need to also look at how we can be more overall efficient with our custodial services, which is probably a whole different conversation. But we can look at that. I mean, there's a whole formula that we go through to try to figure out how many custodians per square foot in the buildings. We are lacking. You are correct. In some of our buildings, we've been a little shorthanded. We're trying to make sure we keep those positions, schools serviced appropriately. But I do think there's probably some discussion, hopefully in the future, about maybe some changes in our custodial services.
Because, you're competing with McDonald's, everybody else, and you got to get the people, and you make sure you pay them a fair wage.
Right.
And that's a problem, because I know when my last year, we had to do a lot of cleaning ourselves if we wanted it done. And I still see that problem in some of the buildings. And
teachers should not have to clean their own rooms. I totally agree, particularly through this time period with COVID.
Well, they're cleaning their own rooms. You need to go and check it out.
I understand. Yes, I know. Yes.
Doug, I have some clarification on your salaries classified line. So Tracy and I were talking while you were speaking, and we think we've got it narrowed down. This being the first year using Allaview again, we just did not notice that your salaries, because they are all charged to your general fund budget, and then we also budget $2 million in capital outlay, that
Right.
by journal entry, those salaries would be moved to that fund. It's double stating $2 million of your salaries. So you can reduce that really to the 13.3 million as proposed for this year in total general fund and capital outlay.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Thanks, Brad. Anything else I can try to answer for anybody? I appreciate your time. Thank you.
If not, we will move on to Miguel Martin if he is available.
I am here. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I will quickly go over our budget for you and entertain any questions that you may have. Of course, just as similar to Doug's budget and what Tracy talked about last week, 2 weeks ago, and then also already today, where I don't have any certified in my department at all. So we do have money allocated at areas where it should not be. So if you actually went through and totaled up my salaries compared to where we're at this year to where we're proposing to be fully staffed, there is a difference there. The makeup of my staff right now is 3 administrators, 1 director, and 2 assistant directors, 6 dispatcher secretaries, 3 routers, 2 trainers, 12 mechanics, which one of those elite mechanic and the other one is a head mechanic. When we're fully staffed, 190 drivers, and when we're fully staffed, 80 bus aides, which right now we have about 30 vacancies when it comes to bus drivers and about 10 vacancies when it comes to our bus aides. Of course, when it comes to the expenses to operate our department, to supply and provide the most efficient time, high quality of service we can provide to our students, providing transportation to and from school. The majority of our costs is in our service department, which it costs to maintain our fleet. Circling back to the conversation that we had this past Tuesday, I know one of the questions was asking, hey, was the amount, if it's approved to move with that live viewing addition to our video cameras, is that budgeted in there? And that actually is listed in the equipment line where you'll see that 470,000, which would be the monthly cost to pay that fee, which was that $6,000 a month, plus looking to replace 4 big buses this year. We have 4 big buses that, per state regulations, once they hit 25 years of age, can no longer be used as a route bus. And we do have 4 big buses that are going to hit that timeline that after the end of this school year, we will have to retire those and we will not be able to use those for the 21-22 school year. The debt service there of 90,000, actually another change that we're getting used to Allaview. Also, too, should have been included there in our supplies and purchase services, which is just the equipment for outside maintenance repairs that we incur, and then also other equipment that we have to purchase just to maintain our service department to keep our fleet up and going. So, any questions anyone have for me?
Mr. Miguel.
Yes, ma'am.
When you said you no longer use them after 25 years, do you sell them? What do you do with them?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. So when we do go through and dispose of equipment with the help of Wayne Correll's department, we go through and we put those buses on govdeals.com, and then individuals can go on there and auction to purchase those. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. We were able to dispose about 25 buses and some old cars at that time. So we do sell those cars on that website.
And then in terms of, you said, if I heard you correctly, you need 30 drivers and you need 10 bus aides to be at staff.
To be fully staffed for the start of next school year. Yes, ma'am.
Now, do you do your own marketing, or does all the marketing come out of HR?
So the majority of the marketing comes out of HR, and actually just as of yesterday, we actually had a meeting, myself and Josh, because usually we typically have the most vacancies when it comes from transportation and food service. So we had a meeting yesterday with our recruiting team. So with Miss Cynthia folks, Eric, Aaron, and Alexis, actually trying to think of different marketing strategies and things we can do to target to fulfill some of those vacancies. And one of the things we're proposing and looking at, one, putting our banners out in front of our schools. Of course, if you drive by our location on Meadowlark and on Parallel, you'll see two big, beautiful banners posted at both of our locations there. We're trying to put those out in front of our schools, putting for hire signs on the back of our school buses where, you know, instead of trying to dial all 10 digits to reach us, putting on there like a 4-digit number where you can text to get information to apply, and also putting a QR code there on the back of the bus as well, where it can easily transition people directly to being able to apply for those positions, so we can try to get those filled while also trying to host a variety of different job fairs this summer.
Okay, can you give me a pay range for your drivers and your age, or do you have an exact amount? That
So
I wanted to drive the bus, how much can I expect to make? And what is it? How many hours can I expect to get?
Yes, ma'am. So our bus drivers start off. So if you're a brand new person coming in as a bus driver, if you don't have any experience, you start off at $18.80 an hour. And we do go through and we do supply training to help you to be able to get your CDL permit, and then helping you to get your CDL license, that after you meet the state requirements, you can go through and operate a school bus. When it comes to others that we may hire outside, it's all based on their experience. So if you were a bus driver somewhere else, the amount of years you were a driver would equate to what your starting wage would be. So pay range, I would say, is about $18.80 to, on the high end, maybe about $23, $24 an hour for our bus drivers. For our bus aides, they start off around about $12.25 an hour. And once again, the same thing would be, you know, if you had previous bus aid experience, or if you worked as a para or some other type of field that is comparable. And I would say probably on the high end range of that is probably a little less than $15 an hour for our 70 bus aides that we currently have employed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's no more questions for Miguel, next we have TIS with Rashid.
Good afternoon, board. So in TIS, if we are fully staffed, it would be a total of 35 people. We have currently 7 vacancies. We have 5 administrator positions, and the rest are technicians and help desk. I think that's it. So under my budget, the purchase services would be for help with the networking or complicated email issues and those sort of things. Supplies would be all the components that make up, like dongles, chargers, cables, switches, UPSs, and equipment would be servers, the student laptop, teacher laptops, and those things. And that's a pretty simplified budget. I can help answer any specific questions that the board may have.
Mr. Rashid.
Yes.
How long was Mr. Fives in the position that you're holding?
I believe 24 years.
Okay. Well, would you have any suggestions? Because we have a tendency, people stay for 20, 30, and then when there's a transition, it's not like, I don't know if you're keeping a manual to say whoever we're hoping you're here for 30, 40. But at least when you leave or when you retire, you could pass on that manual to say, or this handbook, this is what we need to do. Because we have a tendency to rely on people in one position. And yours came to mind, as well as our board clerk. And then when there's that transition, the person coming in has a general knowledge. And I'm not saying you're not knowledgeable, but there are some things, I don't know if he told you everything before he left, but at least we can make a smoother transition.
Can I ask a
Right.
question? How is this related
Sure.
to the board? How is this related to the budget? I think, I mean, is that appears to be an off-topic question.
No, it's related to the budget because sometimes we've had to pay more to train people if they didn't have a manual. That's all I'm asking, because we're having to pay now to train people.
But I'm not seeing how it relates
money.
To the
Well,
budget.
it is related to the budget because we can save some money down the road.
Well, I'm saying on this budget now, what numbers are we talking about? I guess I need clarification.
Oh, I'm not talking. I just asked a question.
Right, but I'm saying we're talking
and
about
I understand we're dealing. I just asked if we had this.
Randy, would you clarify? I mean, I don't see how this relating to the budget. I think it's off topic, and we should be, if we don't have questions related to what's being on the screen, then we should be able to move to the next person. If we're talking about succession planning or asking if departments have a succession plan for the next person, that would be a different conversation.
Thank you both. I think valid question about succession planning. Mr. Hoda is not going anywhere. Mr. Hoda, you can't go anywhere for the next few years. All right. I'm kidding. But noted. I think bigger picture, right? It's just about preparing ourselves in our budget to make sure that we have succession planning and things in place to make sure that we're ready for next year and years to come. So,
but I disagree. But it still doesn't hurt to make sure we have this, because it saves us a lot of money, and that has to deal with the budget, because we always end up going back having to train people.
I understand the professional development piece. I think Ms. Page, what you're referring to, and I know the essence, the root of where your question is, because it's something you and I have spoken about. So I appreciate it. I think it's something we have to keep in mind with all of our positions as we're thinking about, turnover happens everywhere, but so thank you. But are there other questions for Mr. Hoda?
The question is professional development built into his schedule. Is that the question? Is if Rashid has a line item for professional development, and is that
I do not believe so.
So are we asking him to add a line item for professional development or training?
It wouldn't hurt.
Do you have that, Mr. Huda?
I do not believe so. Tracy or Brad might be able to answer that better, but I do not believe so.
If that's the case, it seems like that's the question, is if you could build in something for professional development for yourself so that you are regularly getting the training and appropriate succession planning, document structure, files in place to have multiple people who have access to those data files.
I know there is not any professional development specifically in the TIS budget, and that might be something we want to consider as part of the professional workforce development budget, to include additional information like that for if we're going to be cross-training staff and things like that, that it may be a better situation for the professional workforce development budget.
Yeah, I would just add, of course, HR will have a recommendation for some professional workforce development for mostly classified. And then I know Lindsay Snyder will have professional workforce development recommendations for certified predominantly. So we will see some of those dollars being requested for professional development.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Chief Horn.
Good afternoon, board. I'll review with you the police department budget for 2021. Pretty much going into next year, we still remain flat. We have the chief of police at 135,000, deputy chief at 90,000. The sergeants, I have 5 of those, are about 70,000. Campus officers, police officers, I have 30 police officers, 2 campus officers. 7 of those are paid out of the library budget, but they're making about $55,000 a year. Administrator, I apologize, office administrator, about 53,000. I have 1 of those. I have 2 administrative support specialists at 35,000. And then we have 8 186 employees, school safety associates, and they're about $32,000 a year. Currently, out of my LEOs, I have about 4 vacancies. Out of those 4 vacancies, we have about 2 offers out, and interviews and recruiting are always ongoing for us. Out of the SSAs, we have 4 vacancies. Those individuals have left and went back to regular jobs. We have 2 interviews scheduled and a couple of officers getting ready to go out next week. Our operating consumables are about $147,000 for the department. Out of that, we have contracts over a certain amount with your approval of our CAD RMS, which allows us to be KYBR's, NIBR's requirements out of Kansas and national reporting systems. We spend about $34,000 a year on that contract. The UG MARS, the Metropolitan Regional Radio System, that is applicable to the School Safety Act so that we can interconnect with police, fire in the metro area. That contract is $10,000. That's an MOU with the UG. Most of the other general supplies and everything is for consumables that we use for training. We have a couple software pieces that we pick up. It's Police One, that's kind of specific for law enforcement officers, and the training that is compliant with Kansas CPOST. We have TrackWire, which is a software that we use to align our training officer program when we have post-academy graduates. We send them through a 10-week cycle. Most of the other stuff, we have uniforms and other equipment that's about $50,000. We have academy fees. If we have to send somebody who is non-certified to the academy, that costs us anywhere between about $5,000 or $10,000. That's why we have a return on investment and have them sign a contract with us for 3 years. The other stuff that we have on, I apologize. We have obviously fuel payments and everything we make to transportation, pre-employment psychological exams that's required by Kansas CPOST. Everything else is pretty tight with $147,000. That would conclude my presentation on the budget, unless the board has any questions.
Yeah, this is Wanda Brownlee Page, and I have a question. Now, for equipment, we're not buying any more drones, are we?
Ma'am, we don't have that on our budget. That's correct.
Okay.
Chief Horn, this is Dr. Nguyen. What was your response, please?
I said, no, ma'am, we do not have that on a budget.
Are there any maintenance fees, and how are they being used?
Maintenance fees related to what, ma'am?
Drones.
No, ma'am, there are no maintenance fees.
How are they being used, please?
I apologize. The drones that were purchased for educational and safety reasons that we can partner with our individuals with the virtual reality. We can actually map all of our schools that would be in compliance. So we could actually do a virtual mapping to all of our buildings and use that as an educational thing and a safety training as well. We can also use those as academic or enrichment items if we're working with our kids in our schools on how they're utilized given our services and police science.
How were they used? You said they can be used. How were they used?
Ma'am, under COVID, we have not had a chance to deploy anything. The only time we've ever broke one out and deployed it, we were requested by services to go out and do some aerial shots for photography on our buildings for contracts needed for surveying properties.
And what was the total cost then, please?
Total cost of what, ma'am?
Of the drones?
The 2 drones we have, I think, might have been $3,000 a piece.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chief.
President Lopez, the next report we have is on Diploma Plus, and there has been some recent changes in legislation that will now allow us to use state funds to pay for concurrent credit and college tuition for our students. So I don't know if we have enough time, or if you choose to want to discuss this, or if it might be something that we need to bring back to the board.
Thank you, Tracy. Looking at the time, we've got a little less than 10 minutes left. Board, would you be okay with coming back to this conversation? I don't know if we'd have the appropriate time to kind of cover that. So I'm open to coming back to this.
I think we should let them bring it back since they need to make some changes.
Are you all okay with that?
I agree with that as well.
Well, there's some shorter ones we can do real quick.
Yeah. Well, it's only 7 minutes left, so.
Well, there's a couple of them, they don't parents as teachers. Is that a lot? I'm just asking.
How about this? Again, just for the purpose of the time, and I do want to respect everyone's time and the weekend. Dennis or Tracy, would you kind of map out again? Can we just kind of talk about next steps, right? I know there are several departments that we still have to come back to and get through. Mr. Covington, you had spoken about one of the next steps is at our March 25th board meeting, we will be presented with a proposed budget. Again, by Monday, we'll have the needs assessments that were completed, as well as the salary schedule will be sent out to the full board. So I guess maybe in the next few minutes that we do have remaining, I'd like to get a better understanding of what the board would like to do in terms of next steps to continue reviewing some of these department budgets and how.
You have a question, Mr. Lopez? We was going through the departments, and I agree with Dr. Nguyen. We have not looked at those building assessments. So is the intent that we're going to review all the schools like we do in the departments?
No, I think that you guys haven't you guys compiled them, and could you provide a summary? Also, I'm a strong advocate for, we're watching people give presentation on numbers. If they could just record them, and some people have more time than others, have more questions than others. They're simply reading off of a sheet of paper to us, which can be simply recorded, and we can watch at our leisure, compare it to all of you, and have additional questions ready. So it's not a lot of pop-up questions and them searching for answers while we're sitting here,
Well, we can't summarize the building assessments because they are by individual school, and you would probably need to see the individual school building assessment.
Right, but you're going to send those out to us, correct?
Oh, yes.
And we can send you questions about what we have, correct?
Sure.
Greg, do you have an interpretation of the law?
As it relates to the assessments, I mean, I think it's important for the board to have access to the assessments on a service center for each school building. And as part of the statute, I think that when you guys are reviewing and making your determinations on the budget as a whole, you need to be able to take those into account. You certainly can provide a summary if you want, but I think the board members individually need access to those assessments. Yeah. Whether you do that in a presentation to the board as a whole, or whether you do that in some other fashion, the board could decide that. But I think that is an important component because that's the one statutory thing you're charged with doing specifically.
Okay.
I guess my question was, what's the will of the board when we get back the next time? You will have the superintendent's proposed plan for success, which will have anything new that's provided or asked for or proposed for the board. along with the expectation of new revenue to where the budget is balanced. But when we get back together, I'm sure part of the discussion should be for us to outline for you all what those are in a little more detail, because at the presentation on Tuesday, it'll just be a presentation. And then we can get back into the departments. But my gut feeling is that the statutory requirement for those building assessments might supersede these departmental ones. That's just my opinion.
I mean, if you're asking my opinion, I think from a priority standpoint, the building needs assessments are more important than the departmental, but I think they're all equally important in terms of the board reviewing them. But if you're trying to prioritize your time, I would do the building assessments first. That'd be my recommendation based on what the statute.
And to that, I just need to know how you all want us to do that piece. Do you want each individual principal to go through their building assessments, or you want me to, you all gonna have them, or are you gonna want to send me questions that we can get them to answer? I just don't know what the process is, so we can get staff prepared.
I think we should follow your recommendation, Mr. Covington.
Of sending it out to us and we send you questions so they will be prepared.
Yes. Yes.
So if you're going to send that out to us by Monday, and we've got graduations coming up, do we need to have, and you're going to present the superintendent's budget to us on the 25th. So do we need to have a comprehensive budget meeting on maybe June the 5th? And go through the needs assessments with any questions that we've submitted to you to have be answered, and have a comprehensive budget meeting. Is that what we're looking at, where we need to sit down and hash everything out?
June 5th wouldn't work for me though. It could be a different date, but June 5th is not available for me.
I could say anytime after the 25th, and probably till like the second week in July is the time that you all can review any portions of the budget that you all desire. And we'll be here at your will to answer the questions that you may have.
But I wouldn't want to tie up the principals and what they're trying to do and getting kids arranged for summer school and all of that to come and make presentations to us.
I don't think we need to have the principals make presentations.
When's the last day for principals, just out of a question?
Well, it's different times, but you know, schools end is what, May 28th. And then a lot of them will be also gearing up for summer school.
The official last day for elementary principals is June 4th.
Yeah.
Board, would it be okay if Ms. Page and I get together with Mr. Covington and between the three of us, Dr. Miguel, map out what those next steps and dates are going to look like after the superintendent presents the budget at the next meeting, and Ms. Page and I with Mr. Covington, Dr. Miguel can map out and send you all some options in terms of dates rather than try to figure that out on screen right now.
That sounds good.
That works for me. That works for me.
Ms. Page, can you and I connect on Monday?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds really good. That way we've got an idea of what we're doing.
Well, I have a question for Mr. Covington.
Yes,
if they're
ma'am.
going to present at the meeting on the 25th, how long is that? Because if that's going to be a major thing, then to me, that should be the major meeting, the bulk of the meeting, and not stack 12 or 13 or 14 other things with it. Now, I'm willing to do my job, but come on. I'm just saying, if it's the budget, then that should be the primary topic for that day.
Well, don't you and Randy get together to make the agenda? So that
No, I'm just letting everybody else know.
Oh,
we do, but there's still no reason for us to go the time span that we do. And I'm just saying, if he's going to present, Let's make that the major topic.
Well, Randy, you will want to take note of that when y'all meet next time for the agenda planning.
No, noted, definitely. We will make sure we talk through that. So we'll talk with Dennis and Dr. Miguel, and we'll connect this week to make sure we get our process down for the 25th meeting and subsequent meetings for us to really get through this budget. So,
President Lopez, we did learn from KSDE that legislation did change, that we now have to submit our mill levy to the county clerk by July 20th. That used to be August 25th. So that's going to really increase our time frame. KSDE will be sending more information on what that's going to look like, but that legislative bill is going to greatly impact our time frame.
And what was that date again? I'm sorry.
July 20th.
Okay.
But we still have until August 25th to submit the budget. So I'm just not quite sure how that looks, but just wanted to give you that heads up.
as you learn more information, Tracy and Dennis, just share that with the board so we're all on the same page. Thank you. Thanks for the heads up.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, any other questions before we end for the day, board members? Any other information?
Everybody for your presentation today, and thank you for all that you do for the district. We really appreciate your efforts and time and explaining. We really do appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Covington, any final thoughts before we close?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you all. Well, again, thank you, board members, Mr. Goheen, staff. We really appreciate you. Everyone else that was watching, thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your Friday and weekend. This meeting's adjourned. Thanks so much.
Good night.